Florida State head coach Mike Norvell was quoted as saying, feeling Florida State football. He wants to feel Florida State football. What does that mean for Florida State fans?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. And today, it's all about feeling Florida State football. What does that mean? Mike Norvell made that comment with the media, and it's based on the most recent practice where the Noles had some skirmishes. They had some fights, and quite honestly, they had to get some guys separated. They had turned up the intensity. Golf clap. Like, I'll give you that at least. I need to see it on game day in terms of effort without the stupid 15-yard penalties, I might add. But I want to dive into that subject today. I have my opinion of what feeling Florida State football is about physicality and why it matters. I want to hear it from you. Talk about it on the YouTube page. Give me some comments. Throw out some ideas, what your best memories of Florida State football being physical are. I think it's a great subject matter. Secondarily, Florida State, we're going to look at some of their stats from last year in my expectations going into 2025 of how those need to flip-flop. And finally, there's a player that just entered the transfer portal that has extremely strong ties to some of Florida State's coaching staff, and he could be a major addition if the Noles go after. So let's start off again. Feeling Florida State football. This is the bottom line here, folks. Corey Clark over at warchant.com. Shout out to him. I don't know him, but I've been trying to figure out a way to talk about Florida State's physicality, and Norvell started this by making that quote. It's a great quote, to be honest. He wants to feel it. In my opinion, and again, you could have your own. In my opinion, feeling Florida State football means when you watch them play, especially at the line of scrimmage, they're scrappy. They fire off the football. They want to knock you back. Sure, they're going to use a swim move, or they're going to use a rip, and they're going to use a two-hand swipe, and they're going to use all these different things like to get after the quarterback. But the O-line will grind with you. When they make contact, they don't stop their feet. They try to take great angles. They use technique. It's everything included, each and every play. If there was one word that did not define Florida State last year on either side of the ball, it was consistency. And if you want to go one step further, or maybe even replace that word, it was effort. Florida State didn't have it. They didn't. That's why they were 2-10. It was not a lack of talent at most positions. I know quarterback was a disaster. That's a whole other entity. But overall, in the trenches, they had some guys that were really talented that could have been even better. One of them ends up transferring to LSU. I ain't going to bring that up. One guy goes on to the NFL, even though I'm not sure if he should have, talking about Farmer. And finally, you got Darrell Jackson that came back that should have been a first-round pick, but he loafed too much last year. He's finally allegedly turned it on this spring. I still need to see it. And I need to feel it. As Norvell said, this is something that he wants to see. Now, I mentioned a moment ago, Corey Clark brought up an article in it. Go check it out at warchant.com. Great article. That article talks over and over about how Norvell, like spring of last year, and Clark brings up the point of maybe it's because, coming off a season, you started 13-0. Maybe you saw things differently because you were in a bit of a haze in what you had built, and you just expected it to kind of turn on. Something to that effect is what I think Corey was talking about. Obviously, it didn't turn out that way. After the end of the first quarter against Georgia Tech, if you didn't think there was something wrong, I know I did. I was sitting at a local watering hole like, what is going on? I knew something was off. They were getting pushed around by Georgia Tech. They had lost their way. Florida State football should never be in that scenario. Ever, ever, ever. Georgia Tech. They got a good football staff. They've got some good players. But they are still not in the same stratosphere, especially compared to Florida State's D-line. They couldn't match. But their O-line was more chemistry-laden. It was more effort. It was more desire. They were all on the same page. All the things that Norvell talked about in regards to fueling Florida State football. Remember now, football is a team sport. Georgia Tech did that and Florida State didn't. So Norvell was much happier about this recent practice. Amen to that. But we still need to see it all the way through. And here's something else, and I'll dive in. I've got 3 questions / points I want to make here in about 5-10 minutes on this note. Florida State has to take major leaps, especially in the trenches. Again, that's my biggest concern for this next year. And if they do, they could be 8-4 or better. The schedule is not quote unquote overwhelming. Notre Dame comes off the schedule, so that certainly helps. You've got Miami. It's not going to be as good. They're not going to have Cam Ward. You still do have to play Florida at the end of the year. That's always a really difficult game. It's a rivalry game and all that. They got DJ Lagway. Okay. And you play Clemson on the road. But is there anybody else besides Miami, Florida, or Clemson you go, that team's got more talent in Florida State, especially in the trenches. They're going to be. No, there is not. Florida State should be a team that is very competitive in the trenches every game. And that's during the Bobby Bowden era. There was no doubt about it. They were going to out-scheme you. They were going to outplay you. And they were probably going to be more physical than you in a lot of different ways. They would down block and knock guys down. Their defensive lineman would push an offensive guard into the face of the quarterback. And that's the kind of stuff we saw in 2022 and especially 2023. They won the trenches. The effort went away. And those, I love this line. Hustle plays has become a stat in basketball and football for quite some time. Florida State was garbage in that stat, especially defensively, chasing the football. If it made it past the first level, too often we saw loafs. That's another stat that's attached to that. Meaning, did you maximize effort to chase down the football from behind if you weren't immediately in the play? Like if you're the left defensive end and the ball went to the opposite side, did you pursue checkbox, yes or no? Florida State had too many lows. I'm saying today, right now, there's different ways you can look at it, but viewing Florida State football, if it doesn't feel different and certainly look different, not only in the win column, but how they play this next season, there's no doubt Mike Norvell's job can be in jeopardy in some capacity. Now, how you want to grade that is different because his contract buyout is still enormous. Outside of going 2-10 again, I don't think they're going to get fired. I don't. I just don't think they can. They just hired a bunch of coaches, etc. But they have made enormous strides in terms of which coaches they brought to Tallahassee. I'm very happy with the hires, to be quite honest with you. There's some continuity with the defensive staff in particular because some of those guys have worked together for multiple years. That's important. And on top of it, Norvell also knows Malzahn personally because they've worked together before. Malzahn was one of his confidants. This should be much better in terms of chemistry on each side of the football. Now, how quickly does it assimilate and become a team-like effort? Game to game, series to series, and play to play. That's why you play the games. I don't know the answer to that, but Norvell talking about, I want to feel Florida State football, that just resonates with me from when Bobby Bowden was the coach of the Noles from 1976 all the way through in the early 2000s. I think you're going to see a lot of things happen between now and next fall. You'll have a few guys leave. The portal, just for a reference point here, opens up officially on April 16th. We'll know how much players accept the concept of feeling Florida State football by how many defensive and offensive players jump in the portal. Do you like the new accountability that Tony White, that's been talked about a lot, holds players to each little thing? If you don't, right there's the portal, bro. Hit the road. 2-10 ain't getting it done. You got to go. Further, again, Norvell and his staff went 2-10. He may not get fired, but he's got pride too. Everybody, myself included, threw him under the bus, and rightfully so. I think he should have been fired. I've said it 100 times. The only reason he didn't get fired, I'll say it again, is because of $50+ million they would have owed him. Period. But they went and they did some good things. helped him with the staff, the money. He took a pay cut and spent some money on the program himself. So, hey, that's accountable. Now you got to prove it. On that end, and the players, it's starting to head that direction. We've heard good things about Darrell Jackson and other players, but we need to see it in the fall. And by the way, just as a reminder, Alabama comes to Tallahassee for the first football game in 2025. There's no mistaking that's one of the marquee matchups of the entire 25 season, especially if the Noles could somehow pull the upset, because quite frankly, I'm not picking it, and I doubt very many other people are, but you change the trajectory of your program, not only 25, but in recruiting, transfer portal, perception of the media, everything else if you do. And again, it begins with feeling Florida State football, being physical. They weren't very physical last year. They sure weren't consistent with it. That is a must-have. When we come back here on Locked On Seminoles, I'm going to have 3 questions in terms of expectations and what must happen for Florida State fans to feel Florida State football. So stay tuned. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back. Been waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get the real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find your every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back, guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Florida State football seems to be at least somewhat turning the corner. But what kind of measurables do you need as a Florida State fan to see that? Or in this case, to feel it? Here are 3 things that I want to talk about in general. You can take these as questions, comments, or both. But the first one I've just got to see, and I'm going to throw up some different kind of stats and whatnot from PFF. And these are grades, but take them for the grain of salt. But I'll get to the pass blocking in a second. But first thing I want to see from Florida State this year, and I question, will we see a running offense that is good, not just okay? One on third downs in particular, and I'm going to give you a stat in a second. It's going to blow your mind. One on third downs in particular, where defenses have to make a tough strategical decision. We're going to double deuce. You got Landon Thomas over here. You know, maybe it's Hakeem Williams that's out there. Are you going to roll coverage down and just take your chances and play cover 1? What are you going to do? Well, if you can't run the ball, then you don't have to. You can double deuce. Maybe you hedge the safety towards Landon Thomas. Here's the running stat that is just ridiculous. Third downs last year for Florida State. When they ran the ball, just running plays. 62 attempts. How many yards do you think the Noles had? I thought this was a misprint, but for clear and just exact relevance here, this is from CFB stats. They are elite. If you do not use CFB stats to follow college football, you should in some capacity. They do a great job. Third down, 62 carries, 111 yards, 1.79, no touchdowns. I will say sacks count against it. But let's just say that was 300 yards. That'd be 5 yards a carry. That'd be good. So you're barely at a third of where you need to be. I know the sacks count, but even at 200 yards, that'd be a little below. And you're at 111 and you didn't have a rushing touchdown on third down? I still wonder if that's a misprint. And again, CFP Stats does a great job. They had 16 first down runs on third down in 12 games. That is the definition of abysmal in terms of feeling Florida State football. They got felled all right. They got punched in the face. Now, pass protection, it's a little different. It was a little more mixed. Sometimes it was a jailbreak. Sometimes it was not. But I just want to throw up a stat here, and you can take this however you want. I'm just going to slide it down for those of you on YouTube, and I'll read off some of the stats for those of you who are not. Present my screen here. I find this to be offensive and just awkward in a sense, because some of the players, according to PFF, grading them out, it wasn't that bad. Some of the players, that's another story. So these, again, are pass protection grades per PFF. And I'm only going to talk about the O-line. Jeremiah Byers, 73.3. That's pretty good. Jacob Rizzi, 73.1. Jacob played in 6 games. Byers played in 9. All right. Mo Smith, you would expect him to be pretty decent. 6-year senior. He was 73% in pass protection. But then nobody else besides Richie Leonard is in the 70s. 70 and up is considered good. Richie Leonard was at 71. Lucas Simmons played a total of 1 rep. He's 67. Where's another player? Oh, there's Robert Scott, 65 and a half. He's middle of the road, played 6 games. Jalen Early, young player, played in 8 games, 64.1. Darius Washington, played in 10 games, only 62. He's a guy that people, myself included, thought he might be an all-conference player or better. I absolutely face-planted on that. Keandre Jones, played in 8 games, 59.4. Terrence Ferguson, big-time transfer, 55.4. It's embarrassing. Florida State football should never be in a scenario where they have players going at that level. Never. No way. That is not feeling it. Number 2, to improve what I just talked about, there must be, by game 2 or 3, an obvious offensive lineman that is trending towards, at minimum, all conference honors in the Atlantic Coast Conference. At minimum. When was the last time both of the following points merged for the Florida State Seminoles up front on the offensive line? An elite player, and it's obvious even to a novice, and that elite player stayed healthy for 12 games. It's been a little bit, and even if it was like 1 and I'm missing somebody, like Florida State has just been annihilated. I don't know what the deal is. The last 2 years, even at 23 when they were really good, they had a lot of health concerns. Mo, I give him all the credit in the world. He just couldn't stay healthy, but he fought through it. Congrats to him. But overall, really? Florida State football and the offensive line is their biggest albatross. They need somebody to hang their hat on. I don't know who it's going to be this year. My guess is Micah Pettis will be the run blocker that's that way. There are other guys that could be the center position, has been talked about a lot. The left tackle spot, Hanson's been banged up, but he's got talent. They've got players. But is anybody going to be a true threat and somebody that the opponent has to plan on, hey, it's 3rd and 1. They're going to run behind and fill in the blank. Is it Hanson? Is it Pettis? Whatever. Somebody you can hang your hat on. They need that checkbox to be a yes. It has to be guaranteed. This guy is a dude. You have to shade this way. You have to blitz. You have to stunt. You have to do different things because you can't one up against that individual and stuffs Florida State's run game. Number 3, and it's basically the same thing, but on the other side with the caveat. It sounds like Darrell Jackson Jr. has taken a major step forward this spring. Coach White's talked about it. Other members at Florida State have talked about it. Norvell has. Good. He's 6'6", 330 and really athletic. He should be. He's in a draft year, meaning if he doesn't perform this next season, it's not going to end well for him for the NFL draft. But outside of him, this is what I expect. Will Florida State have another defensive lineman that steps up to, again, that same thing I talked about in the offensive line? Not just good, somebody that you trust to be a game changer in critical moments. My guy is better than your guy. My guy is going to stuff the run. 3rd down and 2, you get a loss, changes the momentum. Florida State gets the football back. Those are the plays that win you football games. Trenches, it never really stops. So feeling Florida State football, those are my expectations. The O-line and D-line has to change. There's got to be more consistency, more chemistry, but they have to play with the physicality that just was not evident on a consistent level at all last year. And a lot of it was just mental. And I think it made them softer because they were afraid of errors. Really need to start off fast. Again, both sides of the ball, probably more O-line because they got 4 new guys up front. They're going to be starters. But if they do, then you can change the trajectory of your season real quick. And again, playing Bama game 1, that's going to be kind of hard. But if you find a way to win that game, Florida State could be the darling in the other direction compared to what they were last year when everybody's picking on them. Who knows? When we come back, there's a transfer portal player that I think Florida State will make a play for. We'll see if they do or not, but I'm going to break him down next here on Locked on Seminoles. Florida State football needs more depth, more playmakers, and more leaders. I think we can all agree on that. And last year was an example of why things can go awry if leadership is not there in particular. I could use that as my main crux here. Defensively, too many guys were open, et cetera, et cetera. It's not a secret. I've talked about it today on this pod, and I've talked about it overall with Florida State in terms of their ability to be a consistent team. They just had too many guys that weren't invested enough in the team concept. Norvell's talked about that. Coach White's talked about that. Malzahn's talked about that. In some way, shape, or form, they've all communicated publicly in press conferences, this is what we got to do. Well, there's a guy that's in the portal that has history with some of the new coaches at Florida State that came from Nebraska. Mekhi Jabayor. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. His last name is spelled Gbayor. If I mispronounced it, my apologies. Played 4 years in Nebraska. Then he transferred in December to Missouri, but he's back in the portal. So he didn't play. He was there for a semester. Now he's back in the portal. Here are his numbers from last year. Again, he was with Coach White and that Nebraska staff, and they did a really good job. Inside linebacker at 6'2", 230, 375 snaps. He is a defensive grade per PFF of 72.1. Run defense, 78.3. Tackling, 70.8. Pass rush, 63.1. And coverage, 64.7. Add in the fact he obviously knows Tony White's system. He's a guy that started at outside linebacker, weak side linebacker, middle linebacker. He's physically ready to be a contributor right away, and he played in all the games last year. There's really no box that Mekhi doesn't check off. The only question is, how would that work in Florida State's scheme in terms of who they've got in the depth chart? And he would have missed all of spring. It's just chemistry. Again, he knows the defense, but does he get the benefit of the doubt? And if they went after him, would it cause other problems? I don't know. The only other thing is, how much NIL does he want, et cetera? I have no idea on that either. That's a private deal. But you're talking 6'2", 230, knows your scheme. Florida State is not, I repeat, is not in a tremendous situation at the linebacker spot. That's not a newsflash. Nor are they in a scenario where you would say they couldn't use more talent in general, because this is a guy that can compete for all conference honors and has a chance to play in the National Football League. He's pretty decent in coverage. That, to me, is the litmus test for a modern linebacker to be good. If you're going to be dominant in today's college football world as an inside linebacker, show me the ability to cover at least in a decent manner if you're a big-bodied guy. The guy's 230 pounds. If he has a good year, whether it's Florida State or somewhere else, that could be an NFL player for a while. He's a tackling machine. He's a guy that will get downhill. He could pass rush a little bit. He's well-rounded. In my opinion, Florida State would be well-suited if they signed him. If not, that's an opportunity lost. We'll see what happens with that. But again, there's a lot of fit things that I don't have access to. How would that work in the locker room? How would the NIL work? I don't know. I'm looking at it from a 100% just, does he fit? Yes. He was good under the exact same scheme last year, and he's been at Nebraska for 4, so he knows what it looks like to play in P4 football. There's not much to dislike here. Do the Noles make a run at him? Your guess is as good as mine. Comment about it on the YouTube page for Locked on Seminoles. Would you go after him? How much would you spend? What is it worth to you? Do you care? Honest now, do you care if you brought him in, if it might scare off a younger player? Like, how does that work? These are the types of decision-making tools that you got to put in your box, because that's what Florida State's coaches do. That's what the general manager, the recruiting coordinator, all those people together, they got to talk about these things. It's complex, but it's also entertaining, and it's why college football and the transfer portal are so much fun. Thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. I truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. Hit that like button, that notification bell, and if you're listening to this podcast somewhere like Spotify or Odyssey or Apple or whatever, give us a 5-star review. Truly appreciate it. Everybody have a good one. I'll see you again soon.